Right now, Chris Jericho joins me on cue. Hi, Chris.
That was quite a introduction there.
Thank you. I wanted to end it with "Q is Jericho."
Yeah, that
can I do that?
Yeah, please. Because what's funny is when I was talking to you before, it's like, hey, what's going on? And then now the radio, you get into radio mode. And
I do.
6-time world champion, and here he is.
Well, I think it's more that I don't want to be I'm very excited to meet you because I'm a very big wrestling fan, and I think I want to just temper that a little tiny bit to ask the questions.
Well, you have to. You're a pro.
Yeah.
I know from Talk is Jericho all the time. I just had Gene Simmons on 2 nights ago. I tracked it. And I've had him on before. He's a great guy, super funny, but still, it's, Kiss is tattooed on my arm.
Right.
So you have a guy like that in there, or whoever it may be. I mentioned Bobby Hull earlier. Anybody that you were a fan of when you were a child or growing up, or even to this day that you're a fan of in your, adult life, there's still that fanboy inside of you.
Yeah. I watched your Shawn Michaels match last night.
Which one?
I guess it was WrestleMania.
WrestleMania?
Yeah.
Okay, the WrestleMania one.
Like
Gotcha.
it has to be one of your best matches ever.
Yeah, it is. It's funny, though, because I had a whole feud with Shawn after that in 2008. That's probably one of the best storylines maybe in WWE history. And I'm not saying that from a shilling standpoint. I'm saying that from a very objective standpoint. That was my favorite. People would say, who's your favorite opponent? I always say Shawn Michaels, for sure.
Incredible. I want to get started on the book. Self-help guide, very, very different beast to anything you've written before. Was there a moment that made you decide you wanted to write this book?
Yeah, it wasn't. It's not really even that much of a different beast. What it is that and just have a question. Is that a mandolin over there?
Yep.
It's funny because I was going to say earlier, I've been doing this press tour for a couple weeks now, and you look through the sheet, just see what's going on. You look at the schedule, but you don't really know what's up next.
Yeah.
And in New York, I walked into Lauren Michaels has a YouTube channel, and it was a jam session. But I didn't know. I just sat down. They gave me the bass guitar, and okay, we're going to talk about your stories, and then we're just going to play songs around them. So I was in an impromptu jam, which was fun. So I didn't know if we were jamming today.
We can.
But I can't play the mandolin. Maybe afterwards we'll do a little jam.
We'll play a little guitar. I got a guitar right there.
I got
an electric guitar. I got some drums.
I can do some drums.
Some
we'll end it off with a little Chris Jericho song.
I like it.
We'll make it up.
All right.
But so I'd written 3 autobiographies. First one in 07, third one in 14. And I like writing. I wanted to do another book, but I thought maybe a 4th autobiography, A, is a little bit pretentious. B, I think it's a little bit more of just the same old, same old. I think people might not buy it as much, even if it's better than the first, because here's the annual or triannual.
Yeah,
the every 3-year Fraley's Comet or Haley's. Fraley's, I was a
Fraley's Comet is a banjo. Yeah, Frail the banjo.
This little Ace Frehley thing there. Which
Fraley's Comet.
Haley's Comment is what I was saying.
Bill Haley's Comment.
Yeah, Bill Haley's Comment. Now I'm just losing the plot completely. Take 2. But so I thought, people ask me all the time, how did you make it in wrestling? How did you make it in music? How did you do these things that you do at the highest of levels? And so I sat down to think about that. How do I do it? So it started off from this quote. Once again, this might as well be a Kiss podcast, but in 1988, there was this documentary that came out where Paul Stanley had a quote that said, the only people that tell you can't do something are the ones that have failed. I'm not going to tell you that you can't do it because I did it. You can do it. When he said you can do it, he was talking to me. Like, I can do it.
You were in Winnipeg and you heard that.
Yes, I heard it. Like, Paul's talking to me. And the reason why that resonated is because I decided probably 2 or 3 years earlier in 85 or 86 that I wanted to be in a rock and roll band and I wanted to be a wrestler. Those are the 2 things that I was really interested in and knew a lot about and just was really intrigued by. But suddenly people started sticking their noses and giving me their opinions on my life and my goals. And you can't do this and you'll never do that. And why would you want to do this? And that's when I was just like, F it, I'm just going to do it. And so these principles that I put together for the book were these kind of lessons, steps, step 1, step 2 through 20 on how I made my dreams come true, how I made my goals happen.
Does that come from anywhere besides Kiss?
No, of course it does.
When you're in Winnipeg and you say, I want to be a wrestler, I want to be a rock star, and there's a great line in the book where you say, had I said I wanted to be Premier of Manitoba, maybe people would have said, oh, that's kind of a reasonable goal.
Sure.
But you say you want to be a rock star and you want to be a professional wrestler. Was there anything in your family, anything in your upbringing that made you able to defy the naysayers?
Well, I mean, yeah, and like you said, if I would have said I wanted to be a mime and a sword swallower, they probably would have given me a little more slack, so to speak. And in reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography, when he said he wanted to be the top bodybuilder in the world and the top actor of all time or whatever it was.
In this tiny town.
Yeah, in Graz, Austria, as a 14-year-old, people were laughing at him. But I understand that because I went through it too. Two seemingly unrelated things, but let's put them together. So the thing for me is I had a great support system because my dad played in the NHL for 10 years.
Mm-hmm. Who did he play for?
He played for the Rangers, he played for the Blues, and he played for the Kings. And he was drafted when he was like 17 by the Boston Bruins. Cool. And this is old-time hockey, 1966. You know,
no helmets.
No helmets, no teeth, the whole deal. Not joking. He's got no plate front teeth.
He's still with us?
Yeah, he's still, yeah. So, but actually, there's a great principle in the book, the Ted Irvin principle, which is always sell yourself. No one's going to pick up the phone and call you. That's something I've heard since I was a kid, which really made a big difference when I first started wrestling and all these other things. But he gave me that support because I think he knew what it was like to kind of defy the odds, do something different. I'm sure there's people going, oh, you'll never make it in the NHL, and leaving everything that's comfortable behind you to go chase these goals and chase these dreams and making it come true, being a very successful NHL player for 10 years, which is double the average, league lifespan, so to speak. So I always had that support from my dad because he had done it already as well.
Have you ever run into any of those people who, I'll let you take a drink of water there. Have you ever run into any of those people who told you you wouldn't be able to do it back in Winnipeg?
Yeah, I mean, you see those type of people all the time. And I think that I don't blame them for thinking that. And it didn't like piss me off or anything like that. But it just was like, this is the decision that I'm going to make. And Paul said I can do it. And that's the Paul Stanley principle, eliminate negativity. And then there were so many other lessons that I had learned over the years that were very easy, like the David Bowie principle. I'm so known for reinventing myself constantly. That's David Bowie. That's Madonna. Like constantly reinventing themselves, but still being a core of what like the Beatles. They were never the same every record. The Stones changed. All these people have changed over the years. That was one of the principles that I've adopted. Always committing. That's the Groundlings principle. I was an improv with the Groundlings for 2 years in LA in the mid-2000s. You have to commit to this improv that you're doing. If it's Chris and Sam go on stage and okay, Chris, you're Jaws, and Sam is a donut vendor, and you guys are walking around Coney Island. Go. What do? You commit and make it work. All those things apply to life. The Vince McMahon principle, work hard and then work harder.
I really want to get to Vince McMahon.
Sure.
First, I want to point out that this is not just a story about how to make it to a particular dream. But some of the most important parts of the book for me were the moments where you had gotten to where you wanted to get, but then it was about maintaining it. And one example of that is, you're playing in Europe, you're playing in your band Fozzy, a great heavy metal band, and there's a promoter who won't book you unless you also decide to wrestle. Now, you've already made it as a musician. You've already made it as a wrestler, but yet you still have decisions to make even then.
It's like I said, would you ask Alice Cooper to also run the carnival rides because he's got that carnival vibe to him? You know what I mean? Because he's the ringmaster. It was the biggest festival in Germany is called Wacken. And you're 80,000 people, and they also have a wrestling tent because it's a festival, so they have, tattoos and a midway, and there's food, and there's rides, and there's wrestling. So the only way we'll book you at Wacken is if Jericho also wrestles. I'm like, absolutely not. There's no way. You don't combine church and state. This is not a gimmick. Fozzy's not a wrestling band. It's either one or the other.
Is that hard for you? Is that hard because you also love wrestling? I know you.
Yeah, but you have to keep them separate.
You're worried it'll cheapen Fozzy if you.
I'm worried that people won't take us seriously.
Right.
It's like I talked to Taylor Momsen, who's in a very popular band called The Pretty Reckless. She was Cindy Lou Who. She used to be an actress, Gilmore Girls or Glamour Girls or some girls show, whatever it was.
I think it was Glamour Girl.
Yeah. But it's like she said when she first started that people were expecting her to be on stage in a Cindy Lou Who costume singing, the Grinch That Stole Christmas or whatever the hell it is. People, I talked to Rob Zombie about this when he started directing movies. People were very mad at him. How can you direct movies? You're supposed to be playing in the Rob Zombie band. You're a musician. Sometimes people don't want you to dip your chocolate in the peanut butter, but my attitude was it's the brand of Jericho. It's all of these things under the banner. You don't combine them, but still, why can't I be a great rock and roll singer and be a wrestler? I am. I'm not being a jerk about it. I'll sing with Axl Rose tomorrow if I have to. That's my wheelhouse. But and I can go have a 5-star match with Shawn Michaels. Sorry, I had some talent. I worked my ass off to maintain it, to cultivate it, to grow it, and here I am now. So if that bothers you, then maybe you should go work on the things that you feel bad about, but don't try and bring that to me because it just washes off me.
It's the work ethic I want to talk about next. By the way, I'm Tom Power. This is Q. I'm speaking with wrestler, podcaster,
Tom
author.
Power.
I mean, good wrestling name, hey?
Yeah.
You think?
I was almost Chris Power in Mexico.
Why?
Yeah, there was it's a great story in my first book. They had a live vote in Mexico. I was either going to be León de Oro, the Golden Lion, He-Man,
I can see that.
yeah, or Chris Power.
Chris Power. I think I went to high school with Chris Power.
Yeah, Chris Power. Yeah, Chris Power got 11 votes.
Yeah.
And
Power, where I'm from in Newfoundland, really common name. So I probably know like 48 Chris Powers would be like, oh, that's deadly, man. He's my wrestler. He's wicked.
They're all in metal bands.
Yeah. I'm speaking with Chris Jericho. The reason I want to talk about hard work is because one of my favorite chapters is the chapter about Vince McMahon.
Right.
Now, if you're listening to this, Vince McMahon is the owner, chairman, CEO of World Wrestling Entertainment. You might know it as the former World Wrestling Federation. I mean, Vince McMahon is really the guy behind it, his father before him. If you're listening to this and you're not familiar with Vince, how would you describe him?
He's a very unique character. He's a billionaire that's built this, even if you don't know Vince, you know the WWE or the WWF. He's built this entire empire, a mainstay in pop culture, in the fabric of pop culture in North America, in the world, and will be. WWE was never going to go away. He's a billionaire, he's a genius, but he's also obsessed with dick and fart jokes. That's kind of how he is. He's a very interesting, lots of different dichotomies within that guy. He will never write a book, I don't think. He doesn't like talking about himself, but I do. He's one of my favorite characters in the world. I love writing about him, and he's all over this book. No is a 4-letter word because I've learned a lot from him, but also had a lot of battles with him as well that leads to some of these principles coming into play.
I've read a lot of books by a lot of wrestlers, and I think you speak more positively about him than anyone else.
I don't see how you could not. I've worked with him for 17 years. He's my boss. You don't always love your boss. Tell me somebody that's been working somewhere for a long time that's had nothing but wine and roses with their boss, and I'm going to tell you that you're probably lying. He's in charge. Sometimes I have to do things I don't want to do because he is the boss.
And you trust him.
Well, I trust him, but even sometimes if I don't, I have no choice. He's the boss. Either I do it or I quit.
So what did he teach you about hard work?
Well, this is a guy that there's nothing that he would ask you to do that he wouldn't do himself. The great example is we were in Orlando doing a show. I had to do press in New York early in the morning. He had me come on his private jet. We flew back from Orlando to New York, had some drinks, listened to some tunes, had a great time, landed at 4:30, both drunk. He goes, what are you doing? I'm going home to pass out because I got to get up at 6:30 for press. He goes, I'm going to the gym. Come with me. I'm like, I'm not going to the gym at 4:30. What's wrong with you? He's like, I got to go to work. He goes, so do I. I get a text when I wake up the next morning at 6:30, super hungover, feeling like crap, from my 72-year-old boss who's like bench pressing 275 pounds, giving me the finger, saying, and this is, at 6 in the morning or whatever. That's him. He just works. It rubs off on you. That's why you get guys like The Rock and John Cena now and Batista, and I'll put Chris Jericho in there as well. Guys that are doing more than anybody ever thought they would do. Rock is pretty much ruling Hollywood.
He might be president.
He might be president. I mean, you're talking to a guy right now that's got 4 best-selling books, a #1 song on the charts, one of the top podcasts in the world, and all of these things are being done by me. There's nobody in the world that has that, but that's because Vince McMahon's way of doing things is there's no prima donnas allowed. You get the job done. You work your ass off. You go do the press that needs to be done. You do the meet and greets that need to be done. You do the due diligence for your character. You train, you stay in shape, and that's part of your job. And if you can't do that, you won't last, and you won't make it to the top.
What happens if you're a prima donna? What happens if you're a prima donna in the WWE?
You don't last. Not anymore.
You get kicked out?
Oh, yeah. Gone. You'll be... You'll be, what's the word I'm looking for? The light of day will shine on you. Reality will strike you very quickly when you end up, being the opening match jobber to, the Tulip or Funaki, whoever they bring in to
You'll
do
be
that
the Brooklyn Brawler.
Well, basically, you'll be worse. You'll lose to the Brooklyn Brawler.
Yeah, right.
And I've seen it happen. That's what you have to realize. This is all one man's vision, and you have to follow it. But it does rub off on you. You talk about someone like The Rock who goes to Hollywood and is like, this guy's work ethic is incredible. He's the greatest to the crew. He buys presents for the catering ladies. He does all the press. He's tireless because that's the way that our boss is. And no matter if you work for Vince and then go off and never work for him again, he's still always our boss in the back of our minds because he does teach us how to make it. He taught me once, I'm not just trying to help, give you lessons about wrestling, give you lessons about life. And that's what he's done for us, and that's why we have such a great ethic.
That's so interesting, because the next question I was going to ask you was a question about what is the most important lesson you could teach a young wrestler. But I really think that we can learn lessons from from wrestling to apply to all of us.
Well, yeah, this book that I wrote is not about wrestling.
No.
It's about life.
Yeah.
Like when I say reinvent yourself, that doesn't mean change your wrestling character. That means if you're stuck in a bad job or a bad relationship or you don't like where you live, make a change. Take a chance. Do something different. That's something that applies all across the board. So these principles work for anything, whether you're a wrestler or a pharmacist or a radio host. And that's what makes it so valuable, is it's universal in these lessons that I've learned, that I've taken. Once again, I'm not just a wrestler. I've never considered myself to be one, because when I started, I was way too small. Guys were 6'6", 300 pounds. I'm not, I'm not that big, but I knew I could be the biggest personality and have the most charisma on the show and stand out no matter how big I was. And that's the same in my mind, and that's progressed all the way to here, to this day right now.
It's one thing to have these principles in your life, but it's another thing to apply them. Is it ever challenging to actually apply the principles you've intellectually come up with?
Sure it is. One of my favorite chapters in the book is the America's Funniest Videos chapter, where I didn't get the gig of being the host of America's Funniest Videos.
I was very surprised. I did not know, as a wrestling fan, that you were up for America's Funniest Home Videos.
Nobody did, because it was kind of like a secret thing. I never say anything about anything in case it doesn't happen. In this case, I wasn't looking for it. It came across my desk. A year and a half. Now I'm doing meetings. Now I'm doing panels at Berkeley Music College, because the guy who runs America's Videos is on the board and wants me. I am having lunch meetings. I'm taking lunch meetings, the most pretentious thing you could do. But this is how far I was into it. Somewhere out there is an actual episode of America's Funniest Videos hosted by Chris Jericho in front of the audience. We did everything, the voiceovers, the whole thing. It was beyond an audition.
Did you like it?
It was great.
Yeah.
Once I got to that point, dude, it was mine. I had it.
Yeah.
Everything was going my way until there was a last-minute swerve. Guess what? I don't get it. And a year and a half of work is summed up in a 45-second phone call of, sorry, we're going with somebody else. This was just two years ago. It was crushing. It crushed me, because from a mainstream standpoint, from a prestige standpoint, for finally getting this big gig outside of all these other things that I do, the money was crazy for 3 weeks' work. But the principle is you got to let go. You got to let it go. You can't let it run your life. You can't let it ruin your life.
But how does that go against? Doesn't that go against the don't take no for an answer?
Well, sometimes I say in there, sometimes you don't take no for an answer until you absolutely have to take it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of ways to kind of deconstruct the no and take a yes and get it back to yes. When the guy calls me and says, I don't have you didn't get it, we gave it to somebody else, I can't negotiate. I can't, go talk to the studio heads, because then I become like, was it Sean Young that showed up at the director's door wearing a Catwoman outfit when she wanted the part?
Yeah.
And they take her away in chains.
Yeah.
So there is a point where either you take no or you go to jail. So I didn't want to do that. And plus, there's some personal pride. But once again, I think that is in this lessons that I'm teaching you, where you don't take no, you don't take no. Well, what happens if you absolutely have to? Well, then you can't let it crush you. You can't let it break your soul. You can't let your career and your life be defined by your failures. Use it to have more successes.
I feel like in the book there are all those kind of thin lines to cross. For example, you mentioned The Rock showing up and buying catering for the cakes for the catering staff or whatever, and you having to take no for an answer eventually when they say you're not going to get it. But there's also a principle dedicated to Stone Cold Steve Austin. If you're listening to this and you don't know Stone Cold, he is, I believe, the Texas Rattlesnake. Incredibly important wrestler.
Maybe the biggest star in the history of the business.
I would say so as well. Sometimes he says you have to be an a-hole. So what's the line there? Because
that one, you have to be an a-hole. That doesn't mean tripping the kids in the cafeteria so they spill their soup and kicking puppies because you're in a bad mood. That means you got to stand up for yourself. You have to stand up for what you believe in. And sometimes you got to be a little bit pushy about it, because people will try and take advantage of you. That happens to me all the time. Even sometimes I'll show up, someone's like, okay, you're going to hit the host over the head with a chair because you're a wrestler. I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Well, that's kind of what we have scripted. Well, then let's re-script it right now. We'll figure something out.
Do you find that hard? Like, are you a people pleaser?
No. I don't have a problem at all, because I'm a people pleaser to an extent, but I'm not going to let somebody cheapen my brand or make me do something that I know is not good. And that's one of the reasons why I have such a big fan base and such a great fan base, because when I do something, people trust me because they know I know what's best as far as what my portrayal is, to be able to entertain at the highest of levels, whether it's writing, singing, podcasting, wrestling, whatever it is, I can't cheapen myself to do something stupid like hit someone over the head where it looks dumb. It's not funny.
Yeah.
For some reason, when I did Dance with the Stars, they thought it'd be so funny if at the beginning when they show your intro, like Dance with the Stars, and we've got Pauly Shore and we've got Anna Kournikova, Chris Jericho, where I tear my shirt off and scream into the camera.
Like Hulk Hogan or something like that, right?
And I said, I've never torn my shirt off ever. They're like, well, you're a wrestler. I said, I know, but I've never torn my shirt off. Well, what are you going to do? I said, run the freaking camera. I'll show you what I'm going to do. One take, 30 seconds of me just totally playing to the camera, smiling, having fun. They're like, done. We get it now.
Right.
But you got to do that. Other people would just go, well, they told me that I had to do it. Well, I don't give a shit what somebody told you to do. If you don't think it's right, don't sell yourself out.
It seems like what to do and the difference between confidence and arrogance, which I think is really what we're talking about.
Yes,
Don't Be an A-hole.
absolutely.
That has to come from the gut.
Absolutely. And confidence so many times can be misconstrued as arrogance. When I first came to the WWE, everybody hated me because they thought I was so arrogant. It wasn't arrogance. It was confidence in my ability and knowing, once again, deep down inside that I know what's right. Now, sometimes saying that to the wrong people does make you sound very arrogant, but still I was right. So you got to stick to your guns sometimes, and you got to be able to stand up for yourself and tell somebody that, don't tread on me, man. You're wrong.
How about, are there ever moments where you have to go, listen, man, I've been working too much. If I don't get downtime, I'm going to explode. So I have to say no to something.
Yeah. Well, that's up to me though.
Yeah.
I was saying I just got an offer to be the host of celebrity arm wrestling on like Fox the Ocho.
Is that a thing?
Well, apparently. But I was like, that sounds like something from like a comedy sketch.
Yeah.
No. Well, they really got so. I don't care what they have. You can offer me $10 million. Still, I know it's not going to be good. And here they are. It's like Carl Weathers is going toe to toe with Ron Duguay.
Yeah, Topher Grace.
Whatever,
It's
right?
coming out. Right?
And it's just like I can do a lot of magic. I can take a lot of bad situations and make them good.
Yeah.
But when I see something like that come across my desk, another was celebrity diving, which they actually had. Louis Anderson was in it. Celebrity dive, like who greenlights these? I've had a million ideas that get shut down, and celebrity high diving gets picked, and then you ask me to do it? No, I'm not doing celebrity high diving.
But how much of that has to do? I mean, you have a wife and you have 3 kids at home. Like,
well, yeah, sure. You have to the balance, and the balance is when I'm at home, I don't do anything but kid stuff. I don't have a lot of friends in Tampa, not in a bad way. I just don't have time. It's kids in the morning, noon, night, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And that's the balance. And there are times when I have to just turn stuff down because it's like I need these 12 days at home.
What do they do for you, your kids?
Balance. I mean, obviously, your kids are your greatest joys in life, and watch them grow up. And my son is. We just filmed a pilot for him because he's a fishing expert. I'm not joking. At 13, my daughters have their own YouTube channel that has like 2,000 subscribers, where they just do cereal tasting or whatever the hell they do that little kids like. My daughter just got recognized in the mall the other day. Are you
big deal?
Are you from CC and Shy's blogs?
Yeah.
And
do they know who you are? Do they know how famous you are?
I think they do, but when I was a kid, and I told you my dad played in the NHL, I never realized how cool that was because to me it was just my dad, and everyone was always flipping out. I remember signing my first autograph when I was probably 4, being surrounded by fans outside of practice when my dad played for the Rangers, and I signed an X because they didn't know how to sign my name. I just signed an X. So that's been part of my life, but now that it's transferred on to me and my kids, I understand why they don't think it's the coolest thing in the world that dad does all these things. Probably resent it a little bit because it takes me away from home, but it also provides their lifestyle. And also when I'm home, I'm dad. But I think when they get older, they'll really appreciate some of these things that I've done a lot more. The same way that I can still go on YouTube and watch my dad get in a fight with Dave Schultz or Larry Robinson. And, it's just the coolest thing in the world. But it wasn't when I was 5.
Right. And do you teach these lessons to them as well? Do you sit them down and say, listen, or is it just in the way you live your life?
It's the way I live my life. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of times when there'll be setbacks. We just had a couple big setbacks this year that I won't get into, but it's like you can't dwell on it. You got to let it go. We have to just move forward on these things and get it rolling. And that's a good attitude to have. I don't ask like, oh, why did this have to happen, or how come that went wrong, or how come this went wrong? You just have to deal with the punches that life throws at you. And it's another Vinceism. I could have made it a principle: turn a negative into a positive. That's a classic Vince line. And that, I think, if you look at things from a positive standpoint, and a positive slant, you'll have a better life either way, because stuff is going to happen. And you can either look at it like, oh, woe is me, or look at, okay, well, here's a mountain I got to climb, and let's climb it. And let's climb it, the best possible way with style.
Chris Jericho, it's been a pleasure having you in.
Thanks, man. Good stuff.